that you've.
Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. My guest today is the most versatile drummer that our country has ever seen. If you want sweet soul, you got it, Marvin Gaye. If you want folk music, you got it with the Mamas and Papas. And if you want vocal jazz, you can go to Michael Franks. If you want slop jar jazz, you get it with Ethiopian Nights and Donald Byrd. If you want electric Motown funk, you get it with Willie Hutch. The list goes on and on and on. Tim Buckley, Seals and Crofts, and the Crusaders. Still doing it, still teaching, still playing live from Nashville, Tennessee. Ed Greene, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, thank you. I've never had an introduction that nice. I mean, and I don't really consider myself a guy that plays all the genres on the records, but the way you put it and the way you're looking at it, those are different genres. It's just I just play the simple feel. Feel is it behind these artists.
Well, and that's the thing is, it's Jimmy Madison, the drummer back in New York. He said that essentially he was a jack of all trades. If they wanted him to play certain stuff, he just learned how to play it. But it was. Can you talk about the emotional side of it, the feel, not throw out the technical stuff, throw out the book, the reading of the notes. Just talk about feel.
Sure. Well, that's the bottom line. If it doesn't feel good, when I got to studio, I was kind of serious, setting up my set, making sure that I was comfortable, so I could feel like I always felt when I was grooving. Sometimes the circumstances were the vibe in the studio, the music that you were playing, these things that you heard, could have only been 20% of the sessions that I did. A lot of stuff, half of the stuff that you mentioned, I can't recall the music.
Exactly.
From what I can. Willie Hutch, of course, Barry White, Hall & Oates. A lot of when I would remember sessions is when I would hear a single on the radio, and of course you're excited for yourself. I remember hearing myself for the first time. It was a 30-second jingle.
Right. Right. Exactly.
It was, wow.
But you how many times did you actually walk out of sessions and you never even saw a promo copy of the record that you just made?
A promo copy? Never.
Never, right? Never.
I had a guy send me album covers, the records that I had played on that he wanted me to sign for him. He must have.
Sure.
Gosh, I don't know. More than 50. And a lot of them. And he didn't have any from Barry White or any from the R&B. It was mostly pop of the day.
Yeah, right. Ed Greene, man. Dude, it is so good to talk to you, man. No, the thing is that in a lot of ways, you never got attached. Now, listen, I'm a different generation than you, but what happens a lot of times, musicians or whatever it is, you get something in your hands that you made and you get very attached to it. But with you guys, you made the album, you cut it, and you moved on because you had other work to do, and you didn't sit around, obsessing about something you just made. You just wanted to keep doing it.
Exactly. You wanted to play bingo with your calendar.
Right.
And sometimes you got a bingo, I remember one week I'm sitting at my desk and I got some guys worked around the clock all the time. I really didn't. I had, enough calls to where that I was blessed. I would have been a workaholic. I would have if I could, but I had enough work and I'm blessed to have had it. You just wanted to fill in in that calendar, Of course, you wanted to work for... Gene Page was my big mentor.
Yeah, I know Gene. I mean, I don't know him, but I know his name.
Oh, yeah, he arranged everything for Barry White. They would sit there the night before, and they'd work all night on this chart. Sometimes the chart was 10 pages. I'd have to put it on a broom stand, and I'd have it 10 pages long. And Barry would listen to the intro, maybe the first verse, and he'd come out and he'd change everything. And here's the thing, he's been working all night. So, I remember those days, some of the sessions that I was on as if it were yesterday in my mind's eye. And a lot of them have to do with Barry White.
You want to take some time you want to talk about his impact on you and the band and the music?
Well, sure. At first it was Gene. I remember the first time I met Gene. Actually, I was writing tunes with a guy for Don Costa Productions.
Wow.
This was in '68, I think, and. Let me get this right now. We had 5 tunes or something, and Don financed the session because he had a lady sing, or the co-writer with me his girlfriend was a good singer, and her friend. So how many? I don't know if we did two tunes, I think, and Roy was my co-producer. He knew Gene, so he got Gene to do the arrangements, and it was the first time that I had ever done was really in the studio doing a record, and it happened to be for tunes that I wrote, co-wrote, and on the session, Gene brought Barry along to play congas. He knew Barry when Barry was walking the streets of Hollywood.
Was Barry
in his black leather coat?
Oh my gosh! Wait, so hold on.
He knew black leather coat on that session.
Now he knew that Barry had not been noticed, but he knew there was a fire inside of him that burned real deep. Gene did.
Oh, I'm sure he did. I'm sure he knew that Barry was someday going to make it. And I'll never forget the time I was at A&M Records doing a session, and so was Gene in another studio. And I wish I knew the single record. It was the first single that hit it big, that started out with the electric clavinet, da-na-na-na-na, and I'm going, it's doing this funky beat with the clavinet.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure if it has a never gonna...
It's all right because you did it with your rhythm, so it's all
anyway,
good.
The electric clavinet was the last thing that Barry put on the record. And it snapped Gene out so amazingly. He's running down the hallway when he sees me. He says, Ed, Barry's going to be a big star. And it was mostly because of this finishing of this record that, I hadn't heard it yet. But his first 5 records were incredible. His singles. And, when Machines came in and he embraced them, it was a emotional blow, beginning of the 80s, 79, because he just didn't write the same without the guys behind him. I don't know.
Well, that's the whole. I mean, Ed, that's the thing that you guys, by whatever group it was in, it was all it was human connection. There was a human bond between.
Most definitely, and it might have happened for 3 hours.
But it's like, I mean, I listened to, and we're going to listen to it later. It is the coolest thing I've ever heard from this. I'm becoming a specialist in the early 70s jazz, crossover, R&B, soul jazz, funk jazz, Latin jazz. That was in my mind, the early 1970s was the closest thing. It was the most multi-ethnic. It was the closest thing we ever got to like a world beat. You had just the idea of you being able to go out and you were a great session drummer, but you were adaptable. You were able to, play multi-ethnic. You'd play with white singers. You'd play with Latin. You'd play with, it didn't matter. It was a crossover.
I wasn't thinking of that when I sat down to play this tune. Whoever was, it was just. Of course, you're taking direction, if from an arranger or from the artist himself. You're just trying to make somebody happy, make the artist feel good about how it's feeling. Now, whether it was a certain type of genre, I wasn't thinking of that. I was just thinking about the drum part, getting my part, making it sound good, making it feel good, getting all the sections right, and listening to the other guys. Sometimes you'd get on a session with 2 or 3 guys that weren't cutting it like the other guys,
Sure.
So you had to find a way of not listening to them and just doing your thing and making sure that it was. And that's why when the click, playing to the click, came in about mid-'70s, I think, I embraced it, and got to really be able to play with a click track. Some guys say, "Oh man, that's I don't know, it's not anti-musical or something," but no, it really helped me. And in the more experience you have playing with it, the better that you can play on the bottom of it and get a good feel,
How do you relay some of this sort of intuitive or more like emotional information to your students now? I hear you talk about this stuff, and the students that come to you, do they?
Well, I used to have an ad in the scene here in Nashville, and I didn't really get that many calls. I mean, and then it wouldn't last long, and I really didn't. I was only doing it I wasn't doing it to supplement any income or anything. I enjoy if I can impart some kind of knowledge on someone, and it works. So I just continued the ad. But I had it in the Yellow Pages one time, and that seems to be like forever. It's out there in the internet world, and I have people call from time to time or find out that I'm here. Are you still giving lessons? And say no, but if you'd like a lesson, I'll give it to you.
Wow.
And it just happened with a guy who actually has his own record company and is trying to simulate the late 60s R&B feel. Whoa. And is doing a pretty good job of it. And he's got these CDs, he's got these artists, he's the drummer, he's the engineer at his home, and he came and found out, and he was asking me all kinds of questions. And I was imparting a lot of what we were just talking about. Sometimes I wasn't even showing him a beat or giving him a drum lesson. It was informational. He wanted to know so much about, just about like what you are asking.
Exactly. Well, I mean, it's funny because I got an email. I've been off the ground 10 months here, and I've just hit that scene with gusto. Although I have not gotten to a couple guys I wanted to ask you about. But I mean, I've become obsessed with Cal Jader. I've promoted a concert with Carl Burnett and Henry Franklin and Calvin Keys in Los Angeles, and I've just gone after all these guys. The guys from your generation. A lot of them are black. A lot of them are, grew up in segregated neighborhoods on the coasts.
Oh, sure.
But listen. I'm a pretty progressive individual. I just somehow listening back.
I was born in Brooklyn.
Were you really? Yeah. I grew up in Stony Brook. So.
Well, at the Brooklyn Naval Hospital, and now it's a parking lot. But my dad was in the Navy, and but he came out. They left after I was 1 year old. He was a violin player. That was my first instrument, was the violin.
Wow, Michael White.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is that I am one. I think desegregation was a very positive thing in our country, but when I talk to a lot of these cats that grew up, Roy Ayers, Carl Burnett, Henry Franklin, they talk about these neighborhoods, black neighborhoods where it was segregated, but the neighbors looked out for the kids. You knew that you were loved in the community, and the messages and the music that came out of those neighborhoods, the Curtis Mayfields and the Marvin Gaye, the other, even the jazz.
But yeah,
it was very.
The artists in Detroit and Hitsville was like a couple of square miles. Had all that talent. It was amazing.
It was just the idea that it was the positivity and the love in the messages, whereas you now cross-reference that to today with sort of gangster rap, hip hop, and it's angry. The younger black generation is angry, and I'm not saying I'm not saying they do or they don't have a right to be, but it's not. There was more strife, there was more ugliness, it was more overt racism back in the day, and yet your generation basically said, we're doing this with a smile on our face, and we're going to swing our asses off, and we're going to prove that we belong. And I love that. I love the Sly and the Family Stone mentality much more than I like the Tupac rap stuff. It just doesn't. It's too bad, because it was a beautiful, and those segregated neighborhoods I think might have had something to do with it.
Could have. I really don't have a handle on it.
Where did you move?
I had a lot of black friends in on the sessions. The two that come to mind are, hold on, I need some water.
Yeah.
Are Ray Parker Jr. and the bass player Scotty Edwards. They both played with before they came to L.A. with Stevie Wonder.
Wow.
And of course, Ray went on to be. He hit a niche. He, had 5 or 6 big smashes.
How did you become a proficient engineer? I mean, I was looking at your discography, and you.
No. That's another Ed Greene. Spells it the same way. Yeah, he works. He's a great engineer that does mostly recording of live, huge productions. And he's been doing it a long time, and he's great at it.
Wait, hold on for a second. There's another Ed Greene spelled the same way. I love that you spelled.
Yeah, that's him. He's an engineer.
Holy cow!
And he's good. He does live productions. Oh, I'm sure he engineered regular, but that's
Ed, that's because I was looking at your sessions. I'm like, dude, this guy was a player and he was in the engineering studio. How would he have that much time?
Well, that's going to happen when your name is spelled exactly the same,
Well, I'm going to take you back. I'm going to rewind the clock a little bit for you, as I tend to do with some of my guests, and play what I consider to be the most relaxed and funky. For some reason, they started the recording early, and enough to get a few minutes of you getting into it and trying to work things out. I want to listen to it for a little while, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay?
Who is it?
It's you.
Who's the artist?
I want to see if you can recognize it.
Oh, okay.
you get the idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have no idea.
That was Ethiopian Nights. That's with Donald Byrd.
I see.
And I mean, I don't know. You obviously, the session itself. I have no idea. It was interesting because Byrd went to California to cut the album with you and a couple of the members of the Crusaders. It wasn't his traditional jazz outfit at that time. He went over there and he brought in Bobby Hutcherson, and he brought in Harold Land, and he brought in Wilton Felder, and you were on drums, and that song's called "The Little Rusty." That's one.
Was I on the whole album, or was it just a couple of tunes?
It was 2 long funk tracks.
I see.
And it has that circular beat to it. It never stops. It just keeps going and going. And it was. I just like the way you got into it there at the beginning.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I mean.
Would there be times if you
built up a little bit? I wonder whether that was. Was that the way it was supposed to? It was produced. I mean, that's the way it's on the album, huh? It starts off like that.
I mean, what did you? Was that? Did you? I thought you played with Donald Byrd a little bit. Like you played. Was that the only time you played an album with him, or because?
Yeah, I can only remember one session.
Because honestly, I have a feeling Donald was like, "Hey, just get a beat going." I mean, that's the way it sounded. It sounded like you were just.
Yeah.
And then they take it from there. I mean, was it that loose? Was it that loose where like you would start a beat?
I don't remember. I remember the studio, but I don't remember any images with him. Because there's another image of another session at the same studio with another producer that.
I guess here's
done it, but I've never heard it. I mean, that's pretty funky.
Are you kidding? I mean, there are people that obsess and listen to that. I mean, I listen to it probably once a day, but I think a lot of people listen to it like 7-8 times a day.
No kidding.
Oh man,
yeah,
that's stuff. Ed, I mean, that is.
Comes in and solos and all that. Huh?
It goes. David T. Walker. He's solo. David T. Solos. Then Harold Land does this incredible horn solo, and then Donald comes in and just blows up, and then they go back to like some like. Oh, and Joe Sample does like an organ solo. It's so Ed. It's a 17-minute song. I didn't want to play. I was gonna play. I was like, dude, would Ed sit around for 17 minutes to listen?
Is it on YouTube?
Oh, definitely,
sure.
Dude. Yeah. Type in the Little Rusty, and
the Little Rusty.
Rasti. Yeah, Donald Byrd, and just go to heaven, man, because it's awesome.
All right.
So,
yeah, thank you.
Dude, I mean, that's the, and then I wanted to ask you a question about working with, you did it at least several times, working with, you were a session guy, and you were called in on a lot of sessions, and a lot of these artists like Tim Buckley or people like that, they'd bring in the bass player, and 2 guys that I wanted to ask you about working with was one was Wilton Felder. And the other was Chuck Rainey. And I was wondering about just talking about your, because inevitably when you're in these sessions, you gotta get a feel, like you said before, you gotta get a feel with your partner in the rhythm section. So
I worked a lot more with Wilton because he did all of the Barry White stuff and then a lot of Motown stuff. He was a great player, and to be, on the saxophone with the Jazz Crusaders and then coming to L.A. and picking up the bass and to learn it that fast and to be that good is quite a musician. Chuck Rainey is a special guy. I didn't do that many other sessions with him. I can remember a few other than the Steely Dan record, which was really something. I got the news.
Dude, that is the great do.
Yeah.
Dude,
I'm really proud of that performance. That was really something.
My wife is
studio
My
Well,
wife is 6 months pregnant with we're having our second daughter, and we are naming her Asia, AJA after that album.
Oh, it's a beautiful name.
It's a beautiful and I got the news, and Josie and then the title track Asia. You're not on Asia. I think Steve Gadd is on Asia.
Oh, yeah, sure. He plays his butt off.
Dude, Ed, it's so cool that you're bringing up Asia, right? Because I mean, I groove on that album all the time. What was that like?
Great album.
What was it? How was it working with Fagen and Becker? I mean, do you remember that at all?
Well,
hold on. You know what? I want to go back to.
I didn't really see Becker until I went to New York to play on the Gaucho album. But that's another story in itself. I wasn't on the Gaucho album, and it was one of Donald's favorite tunes that I can remember. I heard later. The second engineer was aligning the 24-track 2-inch tape recording machine, and you have to put it into record to do that. And he fell asleep and wiped the track out.
Oh, jeez.
And they never heard from the guy again. It was quite disappointing, to say the least, for Donald, you know. But and he didn't care to recut it. Just went ahead on. So I wasn't on the Gaucho album. We cut a second tune, but I don't know. That didn't make it.
I got the news.
So
I got the news.
The Asia album.
Yeah.
Oh, and Becker. I don't remember him. I can remember seeing him in the control booth in New York, but he didn't do much talking to the musicians, at least on the dates that I was on. But maybe he was co-writing with Donald when he would go back into the control booth. Yeah.
Those guys are the most eccentric.
Yeah, I went with Chuck. We stayed in the same the hotel, you know, and then went to the studios. It was a nice little experience. But I would have liked to have heard that tune, you know.
Well, I'm gonna cue it up in a minute. I wanted to go back to Wilton Felder for a minute because I talked to I'm really interested in getting a hold of the Crusaders. You know, I mean Styx and Wilton and Joe and from what I've gathered from Wilton, he was a very, very kind of quiet guy. He was not overly talkative, but my gosh, the ideas and the emotions that came out of his he's that track we played before, the Little Rusty, he's playing bass.
The Little Rusty, I gotta write that down.
You better write that down. The point is, Felder didn't say a whole lot, but just said it all he had to say on his instrument.
I'll say.
Holy mama.
Spell Rusty again?
R-A-S-T-I.
Okay. Yeah, well, he, and of course, he was such a complete musician before he even took up the Fender bass, and he could read flypaper, you know. You know, that's him on the Jackson 5 ABC.
Right.
You know, and a lot of Motown records, a lot of Jackson 5 records that I'm not on. I wasn't on any Jackson 5. I was on some records with them when they left Motown. Their first record that had "Shake Your Body Down to the Ground."
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What?
That was a built drum track. I couldn't play that beat as you hear it if I was playing it live.
So I mean, also putting a button on Becker and Fagen, it seems like their music was intellectual, but it was challenging, and you and Chuck Rainey would just be walking out of there smiling ear to ear because it was probably pretty stimulating. But at that point, at 79, 80, things had slowed down. Our society really slowed down. Things were much looser.
The drum machine had just come in.
Exactly.
79, I heard it on the radio for the first time. Well, we took every session, at least I did, individually. But when you were working for a guy like, you know, Becker and Donald, it was inspiring, to say the least. And the first solo album that Donald did was incredible too. Where he's a disc jockey with the phone, with the New Frontier.
No, it's called the Nightfly. It's the
Nightfly.
It's
yeah, and I played on 2 tunes on it, and that was great too. But that was all built tracks. It wasn't with the full band. The Asia stuff was with full band, and it doesn't get any better when everybody's hitting it.
So yeah, let's it's queued up now. I Got the News, 1979, on the album Asia, Steely Dan album, and we got Ed Greene on drums, Chuck Rainey on bass, Victor Feldman on piano, vibes and percussion, Dean Parks on guitar, Becker and Larry Carlton on solo guitars, Fagan on the synth, and the great backup vocals of Michael McDonald, Clyde King, Vanetta Fields, Shirley Matthews, and Rebecca Lewis. We're trailing out at home at last. So here we go. There you go.
Yeah. Nice track. There was a guitar player in L.A., a big one, and he did some producing also, Jay Graydon. and he was talking to me about it. He said he counted my fills because I incorporated the fill that I got from Benny Benjamin.
Yeah.
You know, boom, baka-doom, and in the variations of it, ga-da boom, or yeah, boom. And I put it on the ends of phrases going into sections. You know, if you listen to it again, it's baka-boom is all over the place. But, you know, a lot of times on a session, I was so into Benny Benjamin, I would ask myself, well, what would Benny do?
You were like writing, you had a little like advice book there.
Yeah, right. I just on both my shoulders.
Exactly. There was no angel and devil, it was just Benny.
No, yeah, just Benny, yeah. Exactly.
So,
what a feel that guy had.
When you, when you were with Wilton and did you play with that percussionist Bobby Hall too?
Yes, some.
And you know, like after a really good session, I mean, like if you were with Willie Hutch and you ripped out, I mean, at the time we look back on it now, and the Mac is a cult classic, and it's so awesome. I mean, the movie's a cult classic. The soundtrack dwarfs the movie. It's just I'm familiar with it. There's some good stuff on. Ooh, and I'm just curious, like when you cut that, like you walked out of there, and you know,
I had no idea.
No. My question is like, did you?
Yeah.
Were you friendly? Did you go out with the musicians and hang and get food and hang out? Like, did you guys bond, or was it just sort of back to your lives at that point?
Some sessions, usually when you had a double session. You know, a 10 to 1, and then you had from 1 to 2 for lunch, and then 2 to 5.
Right.
Sometimes you'd go to a restaurant to eat. I don't remember. I remember one time with Larry Carlton and Michael O'Mardian.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I had brought sandwiches from home. You know, so I didn't order anything. But I didn't bring one. I brought two, and that got Larry to make a comment. 2 sandwiches in. Wow.
You know that
shit you'll never forget. You know, I'm sorry.
No, it's true. It's like
yeah.
Go ahead.
I don't remember. I remember being Riney Press is the bass player for Neil Diamond. They've been there. He and the piano player. Slips my mind right now. Have been with for 35 years, Neil Diamond, you know. What a gig. And he's so generous, you know. I think he gives them 20 years ago, he was giving them $10,000 cash Christmas presents. So, anyway, I was on a date, and we went to Lux with Riney Press. And at that time, I don't know what year it was, on the Billboard, I was on 9 of the top 100 songs. And I mentioned that to him, and he was... and it was just, you know, I'm sure a lot of guys went through that certain months, a year, when they're, you know, everything that they're playing on is clicking. So, that was... I don't really like to talk about myself like in those terms, but... You know, it's that's a confirmation of sorts. You know, you see it there in the top 100.
Do you feel like you've always trusted yourself? Like when you were a boy growing up, like did you ever? I guess what I'm trying to say is like, you know, you see things happen before your eyes that can't possibly be explained. And at what point do you sort of start trusting faith? I mean, you know, have you always trusted faith?
Trusted faith? It's a great question. Well, I've become more, as the years pass, more believing of some sort of a higher power.
Yeah.
I didn't always believe, but what I believe in is what people can do under certain situations, a certain amount of people together, like a session, you know. And that's something I really miss after I came here to Nashville to try to do the Nashville country music thing, and right now it's nothing but pop music, But I got my name around, and the musicians, some of them knew I was here, but never got called by the producers. So I was not mad or had negative feelings about it, because there's nothing you can do about it. I'm blessed to have done what I've done, and I have a great pension from the American Federation of Musicians.
That's phenomenal, because I remember talking to Ndugu Chancellor, the drummer, and he said that we talked about advocating, getting paid for your art, and never getting, he didn't want to be a poor genius, and he always believed in getting his fair share. And this idea that, this was a case where, being part of the Musicians Union in Southern California, you know what?
Being at the right time.
Right. Well, the point is that it was you guys. You guys set the you set the tone, because you said the general attitude was like, we work our asses off, and we're going to get paid for it, and we're going to be compensated for it, and there was no, they weren't going to screw around with you. And nowadays, the owners, so to speak, are trying to break that. But you guys stared them right back in the face and said, no, we're getting paid for what we do.
Well, it was a little bit of, and some of the guys, we could charge double scale if they were calling us to do what we did best,
You know what I really meant to say?
Just go with that. I had a great 7 years, great 7 years, and then the drum machine came, and I really didn't network towards doing more live playing with artists, touring with artists. Like the guy that comes to mind is Lee Sklar.
Yeah.
Basically, like he was everywhere on everybody's video and stuff. He really cultivated that. Of course, he didn't have any kids, but I don't know what that means. But he had
I know what it means. What it means. It means that you have other things in your life that are you have to prioritize.
Yeah. But he's a great guy. I didn't play on too many records with him. Oh, I did play on where I played on a pretty big country record. Clint Black came to L.A.
Yeah.
And the drummer had to come back to Eddie Bears had to come back to Nashville for some reason, and I was referred and did the session, and I was on the title track to Killin' Time, which was a big album for him. And even on that, and working with the producer and having that, when I came here, still didn't have any interest. The guys had their drummers, and that was it. So there is some luck involved. Maybe playing on a record, a country record, recently, that becomes big, and then they ask who's it. But like I say, I'm fine with it.
Oh, absolutely. I just I think in that 7-year period, there had to be times. I mean, it wasn't like a 7 years of work. It probably was more like 20 years of work in 7 years.
Well, if you want to put it in concentrated terms.
It was quality and quantity. But
you're hot, and you go for it.
Right.
That's the name of the game,
You know what I wanted to say before about Ndugu? I didn't make the point very well. What he was saying was he was an exception, Ed. A lot of guys didn't advocate for themselves, and as a result, have nothing today. A lot of guys did not sing.
If they weren't just a sideman session player, if they did artist stuff, well, that's a whole other thing. Or if you wrote tunes, you had to make sure that you were covered. I don't know what you're really saying. If maybe these guys made a lot of money and put it up their nose, is that a little bit of that? I don't know.
No, what I'm trying to say is you'd have players go in and they never got royalties. They didn't know how. They weren't articulate enough to get royalties on the albums they played on. So as a result, they didn't advocate themselves. And
well, you get paid union scale for the session,
right?
And it's documented, and God bless the documentation because with the union, because 12, 15 years later, a lot of tunes that I played on had already become classics and were being reused on film, and you get paid again.
Wow, I didn't think about that. All those commercials on TV with the Barry White. Well,
those were if they used the original record, yeah, you'd get paid. A lot of those things that he did were voiceovers. But the Ally McBeal show in 1998, they used his records a lot. He was almost like he was a part of the show. In 1 year, reuse, I made $6,000.
Wow.
With his tunes. Yeah.
Well, we're in a. It's been great, Ed Greene taking the time today to spend time with us. And before he goes, I just wanted to play him a surprise track. He mentioned the artist before, but I'm sure he hasn't heard this song in a while either. So, Ed, I promise I won't embarrass you. Just one more.
Okay.
Fat City, that I could be living in. Fat City, well, I could be sitting real pretty, but it wouldn't mean a thing without you. I could build me a mansion with a solid old fence, but if you weren't around, it wouldn't make much sense. I could own a private plane and a sailboat in Maine, a tropical island and a narrow gauge train. But if I didn't have you, I could never stay sane. No, I couldn't stay sane without you. In that city, I could be living in. In that city, I could be sitting real pretty, but it wouldn't mean a thing without you. Well, I could be a millionaire, a master of my time.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
That's pretty funky.
Dude, it's.
I don't know. I wanted to say I worked with Mac Rebennick one time, real early. But that doesn't sound like.
That's not Dr. John. No, that's not Dr. John. That's Michael O'Martian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
all right, that makes sense.
Dude, Ed, this is the reason I do this show. I mean, the idea that I can bring this stuff back to your ears is just, to me, I'm doing great work, dude.
Well, and that's more of a story with Michael. You know, he's here in Nashville.
If you have his info, I'd love to interview him.
I did talk to him once, but I've never worked for him here in Nashville. He does projects, so it's I don't know what to say. A lot of guys from LA, and I heard that when I was in LA. So, well, I'm going to move to Nashville. Oh, well, they don't like guys from LA or something of that effect. And I really didn't know. But it's all a personal thing, and what guys are, who they hang out with. There's a lot of that, buddy stuff, and that's the way it should be, I guess.
Well, I just wanted to go back to this O'Martian album. You played on it. That song's called Fat City, and the
one you just played.
Yeah, it was called Fat City, and Wilton's on bass, and you're on drums. And
there's another one that I just heard that I had never heard. Let's see, that someone had on, let's see, their Facebook or something. Something about making it in L.A. Is that on the same album?
I have both of them. I think that's the funny thing, Ed, is that subconsciously in my record collecting, I found everything I possibly could find with Wilton Felder on it. And inevitably, Ed Greene was on drums. So I don't have a very large collection. I have a very tight-knit, small collection of Ed Greene and Wilton Felder, all the tight rhythm sections. Not so much the Barry White and the Marvin Gaye. I'm not as into the soul. I love soul, but it's really the more like, this is an interesting example. The label that this was done on was called the Myrrh label, Myrrh, and it's a Christian label. It's a deeply Christian label out of Waco, Texas. The idea that even Christians would be experimental enough to throw on. I mean, this was as funky as you could get. This album was people talking about the Old Testament. For playing acoustic.
Marion's wife is a big writer, a big religious writer. Sells lots of books.
I know this, but I still feel like at least. Fundamental religion, organized religion, was thinking somewhat progressively to make an album like this at that time. The very square label. This was the funkiest album on there, and that's why I got it. I said Wilton's on this, and Ed Greene's on this. Don Menza. They brought in all those studio cats from. Yeah.
Jacob, let me have your mailing address. I want to send you a CD of 8 tunes that I've done recently in a workshop.
Oh, great!
And what we would do is do the older tunes, and I think you would enjoy it. We got great artists that come through, and it just ended. But at least I've got these 8 tunes on a CD. I'd like you to hear it.
Oh, it would be, Ed. It would be an absolute honor, my man. I will. Yeah, I'll give you my address when we finish this up. I wanted to say. That thank you from the bottom of my heart that you did have that you right place, right time. You were a jack of all trades, and whether you knew it or not, your music will always carry through generations. As long as we have kids coming up that are musicians or artists, or they're dealing with their own psychological issues. Music can set them free, and your drumming did that for me. So I'm so happy. I'm so thankful to be able to do this interview, man.
Well, that's a beautiful thing. Very kind words, and I can hear you believe what you say, and I appreciate that, man. And thank you for telling me that.
This is the Jake Feinberg Show, everybody.